morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 20th day of May 2025. In studio I have Geoffrey Wandeta, who is the Member of Parliament for Tetu constituency. I also have Kabala Kile, Deputy Chairperson of PLP Party, People's Liberation Party, right? Great. Senator Veronica Maina, nominated Senator of the UDA Party, the governing party, and also Professor Maxwell Miyawa, International Development Law scholar, and also teaches at the Kenya School of Law. Before we dive into the conversation, there's a story that I want us to take a look at, which is about the High Court has suspended the vetting of nominees for IEBC chairperson and commissioners that was due next Monday. Justice Lawrence Mugambi issued the orders after lawyers representing petitioners Kelvin Roy Omondi and Boniface Mwangi warned of the risk that the National Assembly may proceed to vet and approve the nominees in the absence of orders. The orders will remain in place until the 29th of May. Attorney General Dorcas Oduor, who filed a preliminary objection on the case, says the court lacks jurisdiction to hear the matter. IEBC nominees face another case filed by civil society outfit Operation Linda Jamii, who argued that the nominations are made without the necessary political consultation. The case is due for further direction on the 11th of June after petitioners serve respondents. All right, and of course that is one of the stories that has been featured in the dailies on the 10th page of the Standard. They are talking about High Court holds vetting of Ruto 7 IEBC picks by Parliament, and some of those in the matter. We are raising the issue of 5th Commissioner Hassan Nur, who was not shortlisted in the initial process. He was not in the advertising list made by the selection panel. That is according to lawyer Paul Moite, and it is also one of the stories. This is on page 2 of the Daily Nation, that court blocks Parliament from vetting Ruto's IEBC nominees. I'm just wondering, Senator Maina, if I may begin with you, and I know the Justice Legal Affairs Committee was expected to start processing these nominees. Does that court order stop the House knowing that it has its own rules and procedures?
The House, it's an interesting question because the House does have its own procedures that govern the running of Parliament. And you know, the three arms of government are independent of each other. So, like the process of Parliament can proceed on. Obviously, the challenge then becomes when a court order is issued and is supposed to be obeyed. Then the challenge comes in as to whether that court order should actually govern what happens in Parliament. And obviously, it's always good to abide by the court orders. But what we must look at is how the court gives those orders and whether it takes into account the independence of Parliament, because the court must always shy away from interfering with the core mandate of Parliament so that you don't put the country into a crisis. And really you must look at when an order is being issued, what is the public good? What is the public interest when that order is being issued? Like, for instance, when you are dealing with an institution like the IEBC, you know, we have a cycle, what we call an electoral cycle, which is captured in the Constitution, under the Constitution. And in this electoral cycle, it's running. Now we are in 2025 and we are heading to 2027. That cycle is, the clock is ticking as with every passing hour. Now, if we continue having a nation where we do not have an IEBC, do you remember the number of seats that are vacant right now, where people are not being represented because there are certain functions that the IEBC cannot carry out without the commissioners being in place. So I find those orders very sweeping, very, very, very overwhelming. And if such a process is stopped, the court must really be guarded and really caution itself. Actually, the court is supposed to read the Constitution. The presiding officer should read the Constitution, caution themselves, and weigh between the public good how those orders are going to impact on the entire process of democracy, the entire process of the need for people to be represented. Because when, for instance, a constituency stays without a member of parliament, you know, there are certain implications that happen, even the NGCDF. There are certain issues that may not happen the way they are envisaged. And those are Kenyans. They are being disentitled.
Sorry, if you don't have a member of the National Assembly, NGCDF stalls, really, does it?
We have a member of parliament here who can give a detail on what happens when...
Does it? Because
it doesn't. It does, but there are certain processes, there are certain levels of representation that don't happen.
For sure.
For instance, when that NGCDF is being even implemented at the constituency level, and you don't have a representative of the people, you know, the way the programs you run, you wonder who is running those programs, who is helping the public within that constituency to determine what is the prioritization of those projects. And then when they are going, for instance, to see the kind of action that must be taken, even on the oversight of that NGCDF, how does that work?
Okay.
And also when the representation is being done in Parliament, who is taking the issues of that constituency back to Parliament for determinations to be done and for them to be equitably represented like any other constituency? So there are many functions.
For sure, the voice of constituents not being heard is real because no one is there to speak for them. But I think on the question of NGCDF, the law is currently in place. It does not provide for any role of the member of the National
But you must
Assembly.
see how implementation of such a fund would impact when people are not represented.
Okay, all right.
Because the rest of the constituencies are represented. And that constituency is not represented. Supposing something is going so off in that constituency, who brings those issues back to Parliament for consideration and determination?
Okay.
And we don't have any interim MPs holding fort for any vacant seat of the MP. So in a way, they are very disentitled and they are disadvantaged, heavily disadvantaged.
All right, Senator. Now, Prof, what would be the benefit? Because, yes, they are raising questions about the process and how even some of those that found themselves in the final list of 6+1, that if the court agrees with the petitioners, then that would be quite a blow. But what do we suffer as a country with a continued delay of IEBC approval process?
I agree with the Honourable Senator to a significant extent, and the fact that there are also constitutional timelines that have got to be satisfied. Secondly, there are also probably representative issues that probably lack of members of parliament in place need to probably bring to the House. But I think most importantly, court orders are never issued in a vacuum. Particularly a constitutional and a human rights division of the High Court is always very, very conscious, and they take into consideration certain tenets that govern or undergird any issuance of an interim order for that matter. And in most cases, the first consideration that the court looks at is public interest consideration. And the court has to go to weigh the greater harm that the public will suffer in the event that an order restraining the performance of a particular activity, if that order is not issued. And indeed, as we say in law, there is no greater harm than a constitutional infirmity or a process that is adulterated by either breach of procedure, by breach of the Constitution. So I think the court, other than considering public interest, always look at the greater harm that the public will suffer with when there is a constitutional breach or there is a circumvention of a constitutional process. And also there can be issues of violations of rights, so that the court looks at if there is no restraint on the performance of a particular activity, what greater harm will the public suffer? On the other hand, I think courts are always very, very careful not to clog, the wheels of parliamentary procedures. But I think our courts have always clarified that Parliament sits in different capacities. There can be moments when Parliament sits as an administrative body.
Right.
And I do believe that this election process is an administrative process. And then there are moments when Parliament sits as a lawmaking body. But in all those processes, courts have held that where there is possibility or a likelihood of apprehension of harm, either human rights or any injury of any nature, or there is a possibility of constitutional breach, the courts are right to give orders. Remember, the Constitution is very, very clear. Where there has been a violation, there's a likelihood of violation, or there will be a violation, one can actually seek the court's interventions. So our courts do not function in a vacuum. They really are conscious, or they are politically aware of what is going on. And I think you can see the data being given on 29th, pending the hearing of that matter. I don't think there will be any greater harm before that date.
Okay, all right. And of course, the Speaker of the National Assembly had given instructions to the Justice Legal Affairs Committee that by 27th, when the House resumes, the committee should come with a report. Tell us what you think of what's happening and what options exist, because we've heard from some sections of the opposition criticizing even the process of arriving at those names and the names themselves.
Unfortunately, I have to disagree with my namesake, Kelvin Omondi, because I see no sense in having to stop this process. Because I don't believe it's about the faces, it's about the institution. If you take an example of the Ministry of Health, how many changes have we had? And is SHA working? You know, is SHIF working? It's just the changing of the names and the titles at the top. But the chief IEBC, sir, the chief commissioner resides at State House. So us at PLP, we just say, let the process continue. Because the more you disenfranchise the Kenyans, it's about 15 to 17 constituencies and wards that are not being represented up to now. The limitation of boundaries. So how long? And this was a very lucky time, because this is one time we got the IEBC commission earlier. Remember the Chebukati one was almost a year to elections. So
Chebukati was actually January and the election was in August.
In August, you see. So I'm wondering, why would we now want to get ourselves to that situation? The minor Kiai case, what gives us hope is that the minor Kiai case said that elections are final at the polling station. So our job as PLP is to appear. Our job is to rally and mobilize our people to get to register, to vote, and most importantly, to protect your vote. So for us, we're not worried with who...
Did you say something like Chief Commissioner resides at State House?
we can replay. But yes, what I mean is that we believe that the head of state is influential in most of these independent institutions.
Is it a good thing for IEBC?
It's not a good thing, because it's supposed to be an independent institution.
So that's what I'm asking. So please, what is this problem that you're describing, and how do you overcome it?
How we overcome it?
Yeah.
Let it just continue. Stop the cases. Let us go and vet the commissioners. Let us get the commissioners that we'll get. And most importantly, make sure that we mobilize for our voters to come out, mobilize for voters to register, and mobilize to protect our vote.
Okay, interesting things.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa Wandeto, yes. So the same question I asked Senator Veronica Maina. Do you think, based on your experience so far, do you think Parliament will honor those orders, or they'll go ahead and do what they need to do?
I think Parliament should honor, and Prof has brought a very, very important dimension on the legislative and administrative aspects of this issue, and I think we should honor. The courts do not issue orders in vain. The courts do not issue orders without thinking about them. And I think the issue we are dealing here with is the issue of the process. And sometimes we say the process is actually more important than the outcome, especially in government.
Right.
We say everything must be done, within the process. And if you look at the quest for electoral justice in this country, which dates now nearly 30 years from the time we started agitating for multi-party democracy. In every election cycle, we have outcomes that are either disputed. Almost every election cycle, we've had outcomes that are either disputed. And a lot of the things that you see people who dispute or who go to court poking holes is about the process. Now, if we are here appointing the people who are going to look after our elections, it is very, very important that we get it right. We have a situation hereby where people are, where it's been said that one of the people who are now a commissioner was actually not in the initial shortlist. Another 6 names were somehow sneaked in into the issue. And I do not know why the Nelson Makanda committee would play games with such a sensitive issue. If you look at the NADCO report, electoral justice is at the heart of this. You look at the Kligra report, you look at the Waki report, electoral justice is an ongoing quest in this country, something we feel we have not resolved. You ask members of Azimio, I don't know whether they are in here, they'll tell you they are still waiting for electoral justice to be served on the 2022 election. They are still waiting for servers to be opened. They are still waiting for certain things to be done. So we cannot be seen to be faltering in this process, even in the slightest step. So the high courts have done a good thing. They have said, you know what, let's stop, let's take a step back, let's look at whether the process was followed, and let us ensure that we give Kenyans an IEBC that is acceptable to all, because a clean IEBC, a trusted IEBC, an IEBC with integrity is the only thing that is going to assure us that in 2027 we are going to have free, fair, credible, and most important, Sam, conclusive elections.
Okay, interesting. You said that members of the Azimio are still waiting for answers. I think they have since moved on. One faction, which is ODM, has signed a deal with UDA, an MOU with the UDA,
10 points agenda.
Or rather your party and Senator Maina's party. We are in some very interesting moments. I want us to take a short break, but first, what did you want to say?
I wanted, first of all, to remind us that how the selection panel came about, so that I disabuse any notion that the Chief Commissioner resides in State House. There is no Chief Commissioner of IEBC who resides in the State House. In fact, if we can recall, we had amendments to the IEBC Act following a very rigorous process of the NADCO. You remember the NADCO process, the National Dialogue, which then produced and made certain recommendations and legislative proposals that needed to be done. And it was agreed during that process, following a very intensive dialogue, that 8 legislative proposals would be pushed to Parliament. And one of the legislative proposals, Sam, was the amendment to the IEBC Act, which then brought in the selection panel. And as Kenyans, we must reach a point where we say we actually must be able to do closure on some of the issues, especially when they're exhaustively done. So the selection panel that then came down with the short list of all the commissioners who are now going for vetting was done after negotiations were done. And so nobody would actually stand and say it was not an inclusive process. Why was it not an inclusive process? And there was heavy negotiations in Bomas, and then the amendment was done. The selection panel came in, did everything in a very accountable manner, transparent. It was on camera throughout. Interviews were conducted. And then that shortlist was developed. But we have a problem in Kenya because we are so anxious about electoral issues that even when the world is coming to Kenya and looking, like if you look at the observers who observed the 2022 general elections, they returned a green card saying Kenya has done very well. And indeed, even the level of scrutiny of the vote, the counting, the relaying of results, they gave it a very high ranking marks because they said even in UK, they did not have that level of scrutiny on the vote. Kenya, for some reason, it's almost like even a ballot paper is like legal tender. It's like the note. It has so many features that ensure that ballot is safe. What am I saying? That our level of scrutiny has gone so high on electoral matters that even when everything is done, even before we know how those commissioners will behave, someone is already crying foul. Honestly, Sam, are we being serious with ourselves?
Okay.
Are we saying an IEBC which is not already formed, someone is already ascribing bias to that institution? I don't think we should start on that slate.
Okay.
We should give those are new commissioners. They have never served in IEBC. Why are we not giving them a benefit of doubt? And when the court is determining such a matter, you know, when the court is determining orders that are interim orders on such matters, or injunctions, or orders to block or allow something to happen, ideally, they look at a balance of probability. Where does it weigh heavier? And that is the balance we are saying must be withheld when there is public interest that needs to be considered.
All right.
In this event, we need to look at 2025 vis-a-vis 2027, the remaining months that are there, even for that IEBC to have full preparedness to conduct credible elections in 2027, we need to allow that IEBC to be formed.
All right. And of course, many gaps still exist at the Commission. You may recall, or you may know that they have lost quite a number of senior officers in the Commission at the level of directors, senior managers, and only the IEBC commissioners themselves can recruit. The other pending issues, including the clearance of the Deputy Governor nominee for Meru County, who was also the Vice Chair of the selection panel of IEBC, and of course the many by-elections that are yet to be held after passing of various representatives. At the same time, some offices that have become vacant. And is it yesterday that there was a decision of the UDA party to expel Senator Gloria Oroba, and if that is upheld, then should need to be replaced, and only IEBC can gazette the replacement. So we're taking a short break, but here is what's coming up. I want us to hear from the Principal Secretary, Foreign Affairs, on what he says about the Kenya-Tanzania issues of admission of some Kenyans into a neighboring country.
Principles of EAC require of all of us as member states to facilitate free movement of goods and persons, but circumstances exist under which states may choose to decline entrance to their countries.